Hey gang, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around for another week. Tim here. I'll talk if you'll listen to episode 47. It's really crazy to even say that. I wouldn't have even imagined me getting this far, and it's just crazy. And I say out of habit, I'll say the episode's number in the beginning of each episode. I've done that for quite some time now, so I don't think I'm going to stop. Who knows? Maybe I will, but every time I say it, every time I get into it, it's a bit surreal. It's a bit surreal to say. So this episode, I'm really excited for so many different reasons, and there is something that happened recently. I want to give you all a few updates, and then I have a super special surprise for you all at the end of the episode. I usually put my interviews towards the end like normal, and this one I was just really excited for. So hopefully you all will make it to the end and stick around to the end, and you'll hear a fantastic interview that I had with someone who is very accomplished, very special, and very inspirational. I can tell you that I felt very inspired and motivated after talking on the phone with this person. I don't want to ruin who it is just yet. Stick around towards the end of the episode. You'll get a little bit more details. A special shout out to everyone so far who's watching online. If you don't know I haven't mentioned it over the past couple of episodes, but I do stream the episode live on Periscope and on Facebook. So if you do get a chance to check me out, I used to do Instagram, but Instagram has an hour-long cap. And although there may be a little bit more exposure on Instagram, that hour-long cap usually, let's just say it's come back to bite me. And I maybe have had to end episodes earlier than I'd like, premature ending, so to speak. Speaking of premature endings, so the first thing I want to speak about today is Nick Cannon. If you're not familiar with who Nick Cannon is, then Nick Cannon is the host of entertainment show called Wild 'N Out on MTV, and that show also airs on VH1. And he's also the host of Fox's The Masked Singer, which is a show where someone who's masked, they're usually in this really over-the-top outfit. They get up and they sing, and you, along with the judges, kind of have to guess who's behind the mask, so to speak. So Nick Cannon has also been known for the Drumline movie. Some really horrible rap music, if you want to call it rap music. And he's also known for being singer Mariah Carey's ex-husband. He has 2 kids with Mariah Carey. And he's been in the news because last week, ViacomCBS, which is the parent company over a lot of different TV networks, including MTV, Nickelodeon, VH1, among others, has severed their relationship with Nick Cannon over some anti-Semitic comments that he made earlier. Now, I'm going to be honest, you all. This isn't, like I've said in the past, and I think I've even said it last week's episode when talking about Will and Jada, that this is not a gossip-oriented show. This isn't The Breakfast Club Jr. This isn't a gossip-oriented show by any means. I like to think that it's a current event show. And some people can argue that, hey, those are one and the same. At times, those can be one and the same. But the approach that I like to take is, hey, here is this current event. And how can we look at it and learn from it? What can we take out of it? What can we, how can we grow or just internalize the situation, grow from or internalize the situation that can help us move forward? And I'm not going to sit here and say as a people, because my podcast doesn't reach out that far. Although I'm sure a lot of people in different areas listen to the show, and that's great. It's very humbling. But at the end of the day, I'm this small town kid from Philly. It's not like I'm on a Tonight Show here. But I will say, for the people who do listen to it, for the people who do discuss it, I would like to think that, hey, after listening to it, it gives you at least something to think about, right? And this Nick Cannon situation has given me something to think about. So just to continue here, Nick Cannon made some anti-Semitic comments, and ViacomCBS did not like that, so they severed their ties with Nick Cannon. Now, Nick Cannon has a podcast that I didn't know about. I think it only airs on YouTube, but it could be on some other media outlets. And he had Professor Griff, which, if you don't know who that is, Professor Griff is a rapper who was in the group, I want to say it was Naughty by Nature, who actually got a Public Enemy. It's Public Enemy. I want to say it's Public Enemy. He got, I know some of y'all hip hop heads is really like, y'all tearing me a new one right now. Don't hate me. But he had Professor Griff on the show, and he had a discussion about who controls the world and who are pulling the strings behind the scenes, and how Jewish people in particular aren't really the Semitic people. Black people are Semitic people, are the true Semitic people, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it got classified. And I'm only saying this because I don't know enough about this area. So I don't want to say definitively that it was anti-Semitic. And I don't want to say, defend him and say, oh, it got classified as anti-Semitic, even though it wasn't. I'll just sit here and say they were anti-Semitic comments in a sense of just context. I'm saying that from a contextual standpoint. I'm not saying it because I believe it was. I genuinely don't know enough about this topic, which I actually had to do a little bit of research on what anti-Semitism is and everything like that before I even recorded this episode. So safe to say, and you all know me very, very well, I am totally okay with admitting my ignorance. This is an area that I don't know much about, that I'm going to educate myself on. And honestly, sometimes when things like this happen, a small part of me is a little bit grateful, because I have to kind of take a look at it and digest it and learn about it before before I bring it to you all, or B, so I can have an educated discussion. Because I have a fair amount of you who reach out to me after you listen to these episodes and you want to have a conversation, an informed and educated conversation. So I have to make sure I'm prepared. I owe it to you all. I have an obligation to you all and to myself to at least attempt to become educated, attempting to go down that route. But he made these comments. ViacomCBS didn't like it, so they severed their relationship with Nick Cannon, and Nick Cannon will no longer be featured on any show or promotion or have anything to do with any CBS subsidiary or network or TV network. And I'm not going to get too much into the response from different peoples, whether it be a news anchor or someone like Diddy, who got out and on Twitter and said, hey, come join Revolt TV, truly black owned. We love what you did for the culture, et cetera, et cetera. I want to focus on ViacomCBS, the way they reacted. I want to focus on Nick Cannon, his comments, his intent, his reaction. And I want to focus on this cancel culture thing. I really, really do. So going from Nick Cannon. So after his ties got severed, he came out and basically took accountability for what he said and said he's still learning and taking the educational standpoint and trying to understand further how many people he may have or definitely has hurt as a result of his comments. But then not too long after that, I want to say maybe even 24 hours later, he got out there and said that, Viacom was basically trying to manipulate the situation and change the narrative, and that they basically want him to apologize in front of everybody, to quote unquote kiss the master's feet. And I'm going to get to these comments in a second. And he basically came out and said, hey, I want ownership of Wild 'N Out. This was a rather $1 billion brand that, I've expanded across different things, and I want ownership, and through empty promises and other plans that fell through, I was basically not given ownership of this, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he came out, and I did a little bit of research on if he has any grounds for that. And even if Wild 'N Out was his idea, he may not have any grounds for ownership, especially considering ViacomCBS took out a trademark on the Wild 'N Out logo and also on some restaurant ventures. So, and those trademarks are in ViacomCBS's name. Like, they're the property that owns that. So it'd be weird for them to either not have ownership of the property, the intellectual property or whatever, and take out trademarks on the property and be the owner. Like, it'd be weird. It'd also be weird to just fork over to write that out in a conversation, a contract rather, to give Nick Cannon ownership or some sort of stake. And I think what it was Nick Cannon's idea, maybe, or he had some parts of discussion, and it blew up and turned into this thing. And yes, when you hear Wild 'N Out, you do think Nick Cannon, and you could argue that he did shape and mold that brand. But at the end of the day, it's not his. And just because it became this wildly successful thing and people associate this thing with him doesn't mean that he's entitled or has a right to ownership. Now, I am not a law school major. I am not a lawyer. I am not an attorney. I have no law experience whatsoever. So this is all based on information that I've read. But for someone who likes to think that he's a reasonable person, I like to think, and I like to say that makes sense. Imagine you came and sat down with me and I said, okay, hey, I want to hire you to run this business. I want you to work for me and run this business. Do you have any idea how to take this business to the next level? You said, yeah, how about we have a drive-through where people can come in and they don't have to go in to wait for their food. They have a drive-through service. And tell you what, how about we even have our servers, our employees have tablets where they can wait outside and take your order and even accept your payment on the tablet. So that way, all you have to do is pick up your food, a la Chick-fil-A. And I say, yeah, great. That's a great idea. Let's do it. And we execute it, and it turns this great thing, this huge thing. And now when people think of great customer service, they think of you. That's great. That's phenomenal. And yes, you are valued. But at the end of the day, it's still I own that idea. It's still mine. And I think what happened is Nick Cannon maybe was at a point in his life. I think Wild 'N Out started out in like 2005 or something. It's really old. Wild 'N Out has been around for quite some time. And I think, Nick Cannon had an opportunity to be a part of the show, and they said, hey, and then the next thing you know, one thing, they had that snowball effect. One thing led to another, and now Nick Cannon is synonymous with Wild 'N Out. That's just a happy coincidence. Now, at the end of the day, I think there's a lesson in there that whenever any of us get, if someone comes, if NBC or, it's NBC Universal or ViacomCBS or Spotify or anybody came to me and was like, hey, you know what, we want to buy your podcast or anything like that, I would make sure that I'm involved in some level of ownership there. And I'm a big fan of sports. There's a Pro Football Talk podcast that is facilitated by NBC, but is owned by the host. And even if you take a look at Joe Rogan, him signing an exclusive licensing deal with Spotify to where later on in the year, or maybe beginning next year, the Joe Rogan Experience podcast will be exclusive to Spotify. It will only be on Spotify. He still owns that. It's just a licensing deal. So he still owns that property. I think there's a lesson in there for people like you, for people like me, to, hey, do your research and make sure you have some stake, some ownership in whatever it is that you're putting your blood, your sweat, your tears into, your passion, your heart into. Make sure you have some sort of stake in that, because at the end of the day, we don't want to get Nick Cannoned. But Viacom severed their relationship with Nick, and there were some different reactions. So, hey, I pulled up some quotes for you all. I want to give you a brief overview of kind of what my thought process was when I was thinking about this topic and et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that Nick Cannon has said is that ViacomCBS was trying to kick him while he was down or force him to kiss the master's feet in public, quote unquote, that it was trying to hang him out to dry and make an example of anyone who says something that they don't agree with. And his sentiment there is basically like, hey, they, as a black man or even as an employee, they want me to get up on my platform, the platform that I have, and show everybody that, hey, get in line or get out. And that even I, Nick Cannon, can be brought down to my knees to quote unquote apologize and say different things like, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that, et cetera, et cetera. Now, where I'll agree to an extent, and we are going to see some consistencies here in how ViacomCBS handles certain things. And I'm going to be really honest, like I'm kind of conflicted with this one. I'm going to be really, really honest here, but not to get ahead of myself. I somewhat agree with Nick, and sometimes, and we all know somebody like that, where they want to make an example out of you. Whether you are, working at a corporation, whether you're working at a mom and pop shop, whether you're working for a Fortune 500 company, or you're a politician, you're a police officer. There's so many different scenarios we can think of that one person where it's like, hey, we're going to make this person an example. If we can break them down, if we can get them to apologize, if we can get them to, quote unquote, as Nick Cannon so eloquently put it, kiss the master's feet, then we're making a bold statement rather than saying, hey, no one is immune to this. Now, on the flip side of that, I think if you don't agree with something, I mean, when you are a conglomerate or a corporation like ViacomCBS or NBC Universal, and you own TV networks, that can be really, really tough to micromanage, because that means every news anchor, every personality, every entertainer on any show on any of your networks, that means they have to get on, and there's no freedom there. There's no creative freedom there. They have to do and say whatever you like or agree with in order for them to stay on your network. Now, on one end, some of you might be like, well, yeah, I mean, I own the house. I don't want you selling drugs out of it. If I don't agree with that, then get out. I want you to do the things that I approve of inside of this house. And if you're doing something I disagree with or that I don't like, then get out. I'm kicking you out. I'm evicting you, so to speak. And while on the other end, and I think a lot of us from a creativity standpoint and from a freedom of speech standpoint are kind of like, well, hey, you know what I bring to the table. You know, I'm a living, breathing person with my own thoughts and ideas. And that's kind of sort of a part of the risk. I mean, I don't know about you all, but when I want to go and do research on a certain company, I might start at their website, but I definitely don't end at their website. I always go to a different website, which I like to think maybe has an objective or unbiased opinion about something. So that makes me feel comfortable in doing the research on that particular topic. So again, if I'm much more comfortable with watching an entertainer, regardless of what type of show it is, who maybe has a different train of thought or line of thinking than the parent company does, I'm going to be much more engaged in that, because that lets me know, like, hey, I'm getting the different side of the coin here. I'm viewing from the other side of the fence, and I'm not going to get the same rhetoric that I get from every other show on this network or from every other network under this company. It's something new. It's something fresh. So I think it's a little, I don't know where I stand at. Everybody, I think Nick Cannon should definitely be held accountable for the statements that he made, especially if it got if it upset some people, if it discriminated against some people, if it was classified as hate speech, then 100% he should be held accountable. But I think to sever ties from Nick, I think a little too over the top, and I think was probably a little bit more reactionary to everything that happened, to everything that's going on nowadays, especially with the whole situation with, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, et cetera, et cetera. I think everybody is trying to walk this line of safety. Like, I want to make sure I'm walking a line. I'm not saying anything too broad. And the thing that's even crazier is Nick Cannon said this on his own podcast, which means this podcast is aired on different outlets. Now, based on the research that I saw that I've done, it's only on YouTube. So it's a thought process that got expressed on YouTube's network. And here's YouTube. They didn't say anything. YouTube is just like, hey, look, we are a platform for creators. We are a platform for thoughts and ideas and freedom of speech. Say what you got to say. We're completely independent. We can't control what people put up as long as it's not, I'm sure they have a ton of content moderators. As long as it's not something too over the top, whatever their, rules of conduct state, say what you got to say. But here we have ViacomCBS who are like, whoa, let's wash our hands of the situation. We don't want to be associated with this. And it could be because they have stakeholders or people who genuinely don't like what Nick Cannon said in very prominent and or influential positions, either to or for ViacomCBS. And maybe ViacomCBS was, put under the knife a little bit. Maybe they had a little bit of pressure that they kind of had to go and, play the fiddle. And they had to appease certain people. Who knows? I'm not in that boardroom. I'm not in that think tank, so I have no idea what the thought process is there. But I guess you can go on either side there. You can make either argument. Now, the interesting thing is Fox decided not to sever ties with Nick Cannon. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Nick Cannon is also the host of The Masked Singer, which airs on Fox. And he, issued an apology, basically. And here's what he said. He said that he feels ashamed of the uninformed and naive place that his anti-Semitic comics came from, that he will remove the video, which he did, and extend his deepest and most sincere apologies to his Jewish sisters and brothers for the hurtful and divisive words that came out of his mouth. So on one end, you got him going like, screw Viacom and forget what ViacomCBS has to say, and they just want to make an example out of me. So he goes from that to, my bad, y'all. I'm truly uninformed and naive, and I'm really apologetic. I had an intent. Look at the intent and not the message, et cetera, et cetera. And he's still employed by Fox. So which is it, Nick? And you can't sit here and say that Viacom wants to make an example out of you because you got fired, or I don't know if it's technically firing, but you know what I mean. And then turn around and because Fox didn't fire you, you're apologizing. So I think it's a tough line to walk. I think it's a tough place for Nick Cannon and others like him to be in, because at the end of the day, especially when you're someone like Nick Cannon, you're a celebrity, you're an entertainer, you're in the public eye often. I think your reputation is just as good as your paycheck, because once your reputation goes down the drain, look at someone like Louis C.K. Once your reputation goes down the drain, it's really, really tough to get gigs in different places. It's really tough to get jobs or contracts or whatever, because now you got this company or this group of people, or in some cases, this person who doesn't want to be associated with you because of their reputation. So I think in Nick Cannon's world, reputation is synonymous to currency. And you got to be careful on how you present yourself, how you present your argument, and how you present your response, because that says a lot. How many of us know someone who has an adverse reaction to a breakup or to a termination at the job? You kind of go, whew, I dodged a bullet there. I've seen people who quit or got let go from work and they kind of just said, okay, thank you for the opportunity. Or maybe they didn't say anything, didn't say a bad word about the previous company, and they just moved on and got a different job. And you go, okay, whatever. That's the mature thing to do, right? But then you got other people who maybe have been really rambunctious, really belligerent, cursing the company, denouncing the company, and then you kind of sit back and think, oh, whew, that was a time bomb waiting to explode. So your reputation, it may not matter for normal people like you and I, but reputation is very important to people like Nick Cannon, to politicians, to other entertainers and celebrities. Very, very important. We've seen reputations ruin careers, and we've also seen reputations accelerate careers. So there you go. Just something to think about. So I want to take a quick break. I want to say hello to everyone who's watching on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook and Periscope. And then I'm going to be back because I want to talk about what anti-Semitic means, what anti-Semitism is, and the way ViacomCBS has handled race and discrimination in the past. Stick around, I'll be right back. Hey gang, I'm back. Thanks for being patient. Thanks for sticking around. So ViacomCBS and their response and anti-Semitism and what anti-Semitic language sounds like. So ViacomCBS had a reaction as well. They had a response, and what they said specifically is ViacomCBS condemns bigotry of any kind, and we categorically denounce all forms of anti-Semitism. We have spoken with Nick Cannon about an episode of his podcast, Cannon's Class, on YouTube, which promoted hateful speech and spread anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. While we support ongoing education and dialogue in the fight against bigotry, we are deeply troubled that Nick has failed to acknowledge or apologize for perpetuating anti-Semitism, and we are terminating our relationship with him. So at first, I think I had the reaction the same that a lot of my younger black audience did. And you view Viacom as this big old white corporation, this white guy with a cigar in his mouth with wads of cash in his hand and a pinstripe suit, laughing, cackling with a hairless cat in his lap, and he's stroking this cat, right? And you think to yourself, you have this image of what Viacom is and what ViacomCBS represents, and like all these different companies and corporations. You go, here's another classic situation of a predominantly white company or white, quote unquote, white man condemning a black man, right? And I know it's really easy to feel that way, especially the way we felt for decades, and for especially recently being an American. I know it's really easy to feel that way. So I had that initial reaction internally. I did not outwardly express that, because a wise man once told me, never make a decision or have a reaction based on emotion if you can help it. So I took a step back. I thought about it, and I said, you know what? Let me go do some research so I can have an informed opinion, and let me just not get on Twitter the way most of us have been and get on here and condemn CBS and ViacomCBS and condemn the quote unquote white man and say this and say that, right? Let me get up and do some research and see if I can really objectively have an opinion, an informed opinion. So after I did my research, which I'm about to share with you all momentarily, after I did my research, I took a look and I looked at the language that Viacom used specifically. And then I went and listened to what Nick Cannon said on his podcast. And then I went back and reread ViacomCBS's statement to see if it had any merit. So here's what I think. I don't think Nick Cannon promoted anti-Semitism. I think some of his comments were anti-Semitic, and I think other comments could be perceived as anti-Semitic. However, I don't think he promoted it. I think for ViacomCBS to use that language, I think was intentional. And I think it inaccurately I think it inaccurately pushes the narrative in a negative way. I think they're trying to take control of the narrative here, and I think they're trying to justify which I would classify as an emotional reaction or a reaction to the times, like a societal reaction. And I don't think he promoted it. Now, I think he perpetuated it, because perpetuating, what are you doing by perpetuating it? You're putting it out there on a public platform, and this content is going to be listened to and shared over and over and over and over and over again. Especially, you're not a Tim Brooks, right? You're not a Tim who's going to have, a few dozen listeners a week, a few dozen listeners, or maybe several dozen listeners a week. And who knows, maybe somebody in Missouri or somebody in Texas or somebody in Paris will never hear of Tim Brooks. And no harm, no foul. I can get on here and say the most horrible things ever, and it's not the same as someone like Nick Cannon saying it, right? So just on that sheer fact alone, you're going to have this shared over and over and over again. So yes, you are perpetuating these comments, this thought process, this philosophy. Another thing that I'll say is I went and listened to Nick Cannon, and a part of it was grounded in, I want to say semantics and vocabulary. And it really goes back to, I know people of the Israelite faith thoroughly believe who are the true Hebrews, and et cetera, et cetera. And that conversation kind of teeters back and forth between a historical conversation and a theological conversation, but that's not the angle he took. It kind of was like a conspiracy type of conversation, especially when he started talking about the Rothschilds and the different groups of people out there who are pulling the strings behind the scenes. And he even mentioned the Illuminati, which does not exist. It does not exist, guys. This is crazy. The Illuminati is something that used to exist, but it's not a thing. But you got a lot of people who don't want to take responsibility, who they like to fall back and point at something like, oh, that's the Illuminati, this faceless, nameless, or I guess not so much nameless, but this faceless organization, this shadowy figure pulling the strings. That's why I don't have a job, because of the Illuminati, or that's why we don't get this type of network TV, because of the Illuminati, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or that's why this person got elected to this office, because of the Illuminati. It's real easy for a lot of people to sit back and say that. And for people who are of the same mindset, they're going to sit back and agree. So I think for Nick Cannon to get on his platform and to perpetuate these conspiracy theories and these inaccuracies, I think he does need to take accountability and responsibility for it. And I quite honestly think he's way too educated and way too informed, or at least has the ability to be informed. He has more access to more resources than maybe you and I would, to get on a platform and say these things. So I think he does need to take accountability there. But for Viacom to say that, and here, let me scan this really quickly. What else did they say? Hateful speech. I don't know if I'll go as far as to say hateful speech, but I can understand why it might be perceived that way. And it says, while we support ongoing education and dialogue in the fight against bigotry, which they do, I found evidence to support that, or at least recent evidence to support that. I didn't go too far back, guys. I went back to earlier this year, and I went back to 2018. So I did not look at the history of, and I think Viacom and CBS merged in August of last year, I want to say. So Viacom as a company, I did not go back. I did not go and do research on Viacom as a company here. So I'm not entirely too sure, but that does seem to be consistent, that they are in support of ongoing education and dialogue in the fight against bigotry. And they go, we are deeply troubled that Nick Cannon has failed to acknowledge or apologize, perpetuating anti-Semitism, and we are terminating our relationship with him. So I will say that because we don't know what that conversation with Nick Cannon was sounded like or looked like behind closed doors. We don't know that. So, yeah, I think that's a fair statement. So again, there's parts of this I don't agree with. I am a very firm believer in the fact that this was very reactionary. They can't get up here. I think you got to play both sides of the fence here and be on both teams. You can't get up here and denounce bigotry and racist actions when it comes to like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and then turn around and then like not do anything when Nick Cannon gets on a platform and says these things. And it's one of those things where, especially, they could have maybe tried to cover this up. Viacom is a huge company, so I'm sure there's somebody who listens to Nick Cannon's podcast, and their podcast aired on June 30th. So it's not like this was, like yesterday. His podcast aired on June 30th, and they didn't sever ties with him until last week. So we're looking at least a 2-week time period or so where they had time to think about their decision. And then there's even time period, like their statement even says it, that they had discussions with Nick Cannon. Those discussions were obviously internal, and we have no idea when they occurred. We have no idea. So by that logic, it could have been a thought out process. It could have been reactionary, but it's one of those things where you can't get on a platform, whether you're Viacom, whether you're Tim Brooks, whether you're Jay-Z, whoever. You can't get on a platform and say, the New York Yankees are bad because they did this thing. And then the LA Dodgers or the Philadelphia Phillies do the exact same thing. And you're like, never mind. I don't really have anything to say about that. You kind of got to be consistent in your message. So I get the obligation to consistency that ViacomCBS has here. I don't necessarily agree with certain things. I think maybe Nick Cannon should have got on a public platform and apologized the same way Fox, I guess, either prompted him to or allowed him to do. However, maybe based on those internal discussions, Nick Cannon didn't want to do that. So who knows? But then I wanted to take the opportunity to go and do some research on what anti-Semitism meant and what it looked like and what it sounded like. And here's what I was able to look it up, because I never really knew what anti-Semitic means or meant. I never really knew. I just knew it was a bad thing, and I knew it had something against hate speech with Jewish people, the Jewish culture, et cetera, et cetera. But I had no idea like really what it was, so I had to go and do some research. And here's what I was able to see here. It says feeling or showing. Here's the definition of anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic: feeling or showing hostility towards or discrimination against Jews as a cultural, racial, or ethnic group. So I guess by that definition, Nick Cannon did have anti-Semitic speech. Here's another definition: of, relating to, or constituting. This was the definition of what is Semitic people, like who classifies as that. And it was basically, the definition was anyone of Afro-Asiatic descent. I didn't really know what that meant, so I went and looked it up, and it said of, relating to, or constituting a subfamily of the Afro-Asiatic language family that includes Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, and I can't pronounce this word, y'all. Amharic. I'm going to try to pronounce it. Amharic. And then I looked up Afro-Asiatic, and it says of, relating to, or a characteristic of the Semites. And then I said, okay, what are Semites? Again, I went down the hole here. I wanted to understand that I knew what I was talking, or get a grasp of what I was talking about here. And Semites are relating to or denoting a family of languages spoken in the Middle East and North Africa. The family is commonly divided into 5 groups: Semitic, Omotic, I believe that's pronounced as, it's spelled Omotic, Omotic, or Amotic maybe, Berber, Cushitic, and Chadic. ancient Egyptian was also a member of this family. A member of a number of peoples of ancient southwestern Asia, including I'm going to butcher this, Akkadians, Akkadians, Phoenicians, Phoenicians, and Hebrews and Arabs. So basically that North African, Middle Eastern slice there, any hate speech or discriminatory language towards any one of that ethnic group or cultural background or racial background classifies as anti-Semitism. So I had to go in because it's really easy for me to listen to what Nick Cannon said uninformed, right? And go, hey, I don't see how this was hate speech. I see how this was anti-Semitic. And then go look up what anti-Semitism is and who are Semitic people and kind of go down that route. And you can kind of educate yourself a little bit. And I encourage you all to go do the same. Again, 3 episodes in a row, I'm saying this now. I can understand if this is one of your first stops for insight and education. This definitely should not be your last, because I should not be the last stop when it comes to education. I'm simply uninformed. If I'm very informed about certain things, I will broadcast that. But again, this should not be your last stop. Go and do some research, and hey, call me out if I'm wrong or if I had a misinterpretation of something. Call me out. The last thing I want to talk about with this topic, and then I want to move on to something a little bit more positive and uplifting, is Viacom's reaction to the George Floyd situation. Because I wanted to draw a line of consistency. I wanted to, because again, initially that young black man in me had this reaction of, oh, here comes another predominantly white corporation trying to knock another brother down, right? And I wanted to go back and look at what their reaction to the George Floyd situation was. So here's an article that I came across, and this was pulled directly from Deadline. So no credit to me, all Deadline. But this is an article that I came across, and I'm going to read it here. It's not too long. I'm going to try not to butcher this. Hopefully I can do this in one take, but bear with me here as I try to read this. ViacomCBS has unveiled a powerful 8-minute, 46-second video tribute to George Floyd, which marks the time in which Floyd was pinned to the ground with a police officer's knee on his neck, resulting in his death. In an internal memo, ViacomCBS President of Entertainment and Youth Brands, Chris McCarthy, announced Sunday. Now, we don't know what Sunday is, guys, by the way. This is an old article. But announced Sunday that all entertainment and youth brands and platforms will be going dark for 8 minutes and 46 seconds at 5 p.m. Monday, which marks the time in which George Floyd was killed. The time will not only serve as a tribute to Floyd, but as a tribute to all those who have been victims of racism, including Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and countless others. ViacomCBS also went dark in 2018 for 17 minutes in solidarity for the National School Walkout to honor the 17 students of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High in Parkland, Florida, who were killed. It's crazy. I actually did an episode about that too. How about that? So crazy how things come full circle. In addition to the killings, McCarthy addresses the everyday inequality in the community and how the pandemic disproportionately impacts communities of color. He went on to talk about what ViacomCBS is doing as a call to action to help support the communities, including Blackout Tuesday, where they will not hold any meeting or conduct any business in order to stand in solidarity with their black colleagues. ViacomCBS's international entertainment and youth partners will be going dark as well as others and others Viacom. That's actually a typo. They put and others twice. Here, let's start over. ViacomCBS International Entertainment and youth partners will be going dark, as well as other ViacomCBS brands, including BET, Nickelodeon, CBS Sports, MTV, VH1, CMT, which is the country music. Oops, sorry about that loud car in the background, guys. Which I think is country music television. Logo Media, Comedy Central, Paramount Network, Smithsonian Channel, and TV Land are also among channels going dark. So keep in mind, everyone, that ViacomCBS owns a lot of networks. Nickelodeon also released a scrolling video which contains language from the Kids' Bill of Rights, which the network first put together on June 7, 1990. It begins with the statement, Nickelodeon is going off the air for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in support of justice, equality, and equal rights. Here is the full memo, everyone, that Chris McCarthy put out to the team, his internal team. The last few weeks have brought to surface long-standing racism, videos of unspeakable behavior, and the harsh reality of inequality many in our community deal with on a regular and daily basis. In Minneapolis, the horrifying murder of George Floyd, in Georgia, the senseless killing of Ahmaud Arbery, and in Kentucky, the deplorable shooting of Breonna Taylor, to name just a few recent examples. This is on top of a pandemic which has emphasized the tragic inequalities that disproportionately impact communities of color, especially African American and Latinx communities, in addition to the unjust targeting of Asian Americans. While I am not a person of color and can never fully understand this experience, I am offended by the systemic racism, and want to stand together with our communities of color in the hurt and pain. We must all do our part. Discrimination against one of us is discrimination against all of us. Therefore, as president of our group, I commit that we will do the following. Bullet point 1. Use our platforms to shine a light on realities of racial injustice and call for inequality. So what he did was they posted a Black Lives Matter statement. It says, we stand with Black Lives Matter movement and call for an end of systemic racism. The racist and brutal attacks must end. We call for justice. Bullet point number 2, amplify the voices of the communities we serve and provide a call to action for change. Tomorrow, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, we will go dark across our brands and platforms to mark the time in which George Floyd was brutally killed as a tribute to Mr. Floyd and other victims of racism. We will provide a call to action encouraging our audiences to get involved and help be a part of the solution with our partner Color of Change. And here's the final bullet point. Foster a culture that deeply values and respects diversity and inclusion. On Tuesday, we are joining Blackout Tuesday to focus our attention away from work and towards our community. We will not hold any meetings nor conduct any business. Rather, we will stand in solidarity with our African American colleagues and loved ones across the country. This is just the beginning, and I acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. Over the next few weeks, you will be invited to join us for discussions on ways we can use our brands and platforms to inspire and enact change. So I think that's a consistent message to their reaction to a degree with Nick Cannon. Do I think they should have severed their relationship with Nick Cannon? Absolutely not. Again, that's all based on conversations that Nick Cannon had with them internally. They could have came to Nick and said, hey man, this isn't right. This isn't great. This is not what we represent and what we stand for. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and we think you owe these people an apology. And Nick Cannon could have said, F you, no. And it could have been a very abrasive and violent conversation. And ViacomCBS could have been like, well, you know what? We're going to sever our ties with you. And that was that. Or they could have just had a really over-the-top reaction and decided to let go of him. Or, hey, it could have been some dude behind the scenes pulling strings and didn't like what a black man had to say and they let him go. Whatever any of us need to believe to sleep better at night. But I will say that after going back and reading this article and seeing what their message was pertaining to Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, I think it's a safe bet to say, hey, that conversation with Nick Cannon may have been very civil and they ended up severing their ties because of a disagreement, especially a disagreement and maybe how Nick should have replied or responded. So with that said, hopefully that is some context, some information for all of you to sit back and make a decision or have an opinion, a better opinion, a more informed opinion, and just keep the discussion going and go from there. And as always, hit me up. Let me know what you think. Shout out to everyone who has sought out Spreaker and followed me and liked episodes on Spreaker and allows you to react accordingly to the episodes that are out. And shout out to everyone who on a consistent basis reaches out to me to continue the discussion, to have a further discussion on some of the topics. I really appreciate it. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, everyone. How can we approach this from a philosophical and a mature standpoint? How can we continue the discussion in a productive way? And how can we promote or normalize the stance of having a more informed opinion? So I appreciate that, everyone. So we're going to transition into the next topic. Before we do, I want to say hello to everyone who's watching live, and I'll be back on the other side of the break. Hey, gang, I'm back. I appreciate you sticking around for so long. These past few episodes, been a little lengthy, especially last week. Clocked in at a lot of time. I know I had a few people hit me up like, damn, Tim, what are you doing? And hey, I'm on my grind, y'all. I'm on my grind. So I appreciate the engagement. Now, before I get to this interview, let me give you all a little bit of context here. So I had the awesome opportunity to interview an entrepreneur, a proud immigrant, a determined, passionate, motivated young lady, and a fun young lady. I didn't know about that last part until our interview. That this young lady was very fun, very, very fun. Hopefully when the opportunity arrives and this whole pandemic situation goes away, we can go and get some food together. We both love food, and we were talking about food. You'll hear a little bit of that in the interview. But this young lady, it was really important to have this young lady on the episode for so many different reasons. First and foremost, I spoke a little bit about it last week. I think it's really, really important to have women on any show, but more especially this show. I think a lot of the topics, objectively speaking, are good topics for anyone to give feedback on. And I think it's an opportunity for anyone to get on this platform and promote a certain thought process or a certain topic just to continue the discussion or just to bring attention to something positive, which this young lady has done in the past and even on this show. And I think it's important to have women in a powerful position, whether it be an entrepreneur, whether it be someone who participates in charity, whether it be someone in the entertainment business. I think it's really important to have women on this show to show other women that, hey, we're not going to settle for this societal archetype on what you're supposed to be like. We're not going to settle on you're supposed to be an Instagram model and that's where your future lies, or you're supposed to just be a wife. You're supposed to get married to a man or a woman and that's all you're going to be. It's just a wife. Or, hey, you're just going to go and work this 9-to-5 job, or, hey, this midnight to 8 a.m. job, or whatever the case may be. And that's all you're going to do. And that's all you're going to be. I think it's really important to have someone that you can reach out and touch. This young lady is not a celebrity by any means. This young lady is not an entertainer, so to speak. This person isn't a Nick Cannon. And I think it's really important for us to see somebody in a realistic position, someone who has gone through some of the trials and tribulations that we've gone through, some of the challenges that we've gone through, and more importantly, some of the challenges that we have not gone through, just to see that our goals and our dreams are attainable. And I think it's really important for young men and young women, but more specifically young women, to see a positive, respectable, and determined role model to look up to and go, you know what? It is achievable. It is something that can be maintained. It is something that I can grasp. I think that's really, really important. And I'm very humbled. I'm very proud to have this young lady on the show because she encompasses everything that I feel young women need to look up to and see as a positive role model. Now, I don't know what this young lady does on her downtime. I don't know what her life has been like, too much anyway, before she came to America. I don't know what stocks she has, what companies she endorses. But what I do know is in doing research, even before I agreed to have her on the show, I was very proud, very excited, and very humbled to see all the different things that she was involved in. And to have an opportunity to talk about that on my show, I can't put into words. I can't express how much it means to me. This young lady's name is Tsvetta Kaleynska. And she was born in Bulgaria and made her way over to the U.S. in 2008. She was born in Veliko Tarnovo, Bulgaria, which is a town in north central Bulgaria. And what some people believe is, or a lot of people consider, is the administrative center of the province there. And she lived her young life, her young adult life, and her teenage life in Bulgaria, and came over to America in 2008. And it's where she continued her education, got her further education, started her business, participated in different community works and charitable works. And the reason it was so important to have Tsvetta on the show here is she participated in a camp for young women called GLOW, Girls Leading Our World. And I don't want to talk too much about it here because I think Tsvetta did a great job in talking about GLOW in our interview, and I don't want to take away from the integrity of the interview, but it's really important to have someone come out of a program like GLOW and encourage it and promote it. So Tsvetta contributes a lot of who she is and what she is to GLOW. And it kind of made me think about the things I'm involved with now as an adult and the things that I was involved in as a child, and how it made me who I am as a person today, how it influenced who I am as a person today. Not all of those things were great. A lot of those things were learning lessons and learning experiences, but it made me make better decisions later on in life. And I think Tsvetta is the embodiment of learning from your experiences. She spoke a lot about Peace Corps, which I did a little bit of research on Peace Corps. And for those of you who don't know what Peace Corps is, and maybe some of you pronounce it as Peace Corps, it is basically an organization that was founded in 1961 by John F. Kennedy. And at the time, he spoke about it when he was a senator. He wasn't even the elected president yet. It was founded by John F. Kennedy, and it basically, the goal here, the mission statement here, was to more of an outreach program to get a lot of volunteers involved in the community, to get a lot of people involved in charitable works, to get a lot of people involved in developing nations and countries, and just get them to where they need to be from a societal standpoint, from an economic standpoint. Their contribution to medical science and just different pandemics across the world has been numerous, and there have been over 220,000 volunteers, and many of which go on to become very prominent and successful people in their careers. And it's definitely something that I can relate to because, as you all know, I'm a Freemason, and being a Mason, I'm heavily involved in charity and community outreach and philanthropy. And it's something that just soothes the soul. And I can honestly say that I never knew how much I liked charity until I could see a young man or young woman's or even a child's eyes light up when they get that brand new tie, when they get those brand new school supplies, when they get those Christmas gifts, and the tears that you see in a parent's eyes when they can now give their children something tangible to hold on to, or even something that's not tangible like a scholarship, because they knew they couldn't, they weren't in a position to do it, but someone else was able to make a sacrifice and give them what they couldn't give. It's just, you can't put a value on that. Tsvetta does a good job of talking about why that's important. And she gives a little bit more information on why that's important for young women in particular. So without further ado, I want to bring you to this interview. It was a great interview. It was a phenomenal interview. Probably one of the funnest interviews I've ever had. And I'm so glad I had the opportunity to have Tsvetta on the show. So without further ado, here's Tsvetta speaking about girls leading our world. Check it out.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Another week, another episode, but this time around, a very special guest. I am extremely excited to have a talented young lady on the phone right now, an entrepreneur, a peace advocate. Right now, we have Tsvetta Kaleynska on the phone. Tsvetta, how are you?
Hey, Tim. I am very good. Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Today was a little bit rocky, to be honest, but you're the light at the end of the tunnel. I can't tell you how long I've been looking forward to this. I'm really excited.
You're so sweet. And likewise, I'm really happy we're able to connect, and very nice to connect with all of your audience as well. So thanks so much for having me on.
No problem. And the reason this episode is going to be so impactful, earlier in the week, I did a poll. And I asked everyone, hey, who would you like to hear from? Who would you like to have on the show? And one of those options was an entrepreneur. And lo and behold, we have an entrepreneur. So right now, I like to tap into that entrepreneurial mindset. I think a lot of people, before they start their own business, before they become partners in a firm, et cetera, they have these ambitions, and they don't know how to put those ambitions on paper. What would be some advice you would give to that person who says, hey, I want to do this, and they see the mountain, but they don't know where to get started?
Great question. As an entrepreneur and as a dreamer, as a hustler as well, as an immigrant and a recent student, I can imagine how people feel when they think of entrepreneurship. You not only see the mountain ahead of you, but you also see so many obstacles when it comes to thinking about the finances or how you're going to start it, how you're going to run your business. But you know what? The one easy and simple advice that I can give everyone as an entrepreneur myself is just do it. And I kept on hearing every time I watched TV or I'd watch a motivational interview or any documentary, and I'd hear those entrepreneurs say, just do it. And I always thought to myself, sure, like it's that easy. But you know what? It is that easy. If you start walking towards your goal, you will get to it eventually. It might take time, but you just got to do it. So that is the one piece of advice I can give as an entrepreneur and as someone who's been through a very rocky road of starting my own business. And I encourage everyone to do it very, very highly. Go for it.
That's great advice, and I agree. I think sometimes the best advice is the simple advice, the most simple advice, and it can be pretty intimidating for someone who doesn't know where to get started. And
oh yeah,
that usually,
absolutely.
Yeah, and it could be to the point where you don't know where to get started, you're overwhelmed, and that seems to happen most when you're younger, as a kid, a young man, a young woman. Now, you work through Peace Corps and through something called GLOW that we're going to talk about. You must deal with a lot of young women who don't know where to get started and don't know what to do. So what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about GLOW, what that stands for, GLOW, and what it's like working with so many young ladies who may not know where to start at.
It's probably GLOW is the best initiative that I've ever been part of, and GLOW is also the reason I am an entrepreneur, and I'll tell you why. Before I even mention more about it, I just wanted to tell all the listeners. So GLOW stands for Girls Leading Our World. It is a week-long female empowerment camp which is run in rural Bulgaria in Eastern Europe on the Balkans. And it's basically a nonprofit which continues and focuses its mission to educate and empower girls, helping them really fulfill their potential as future leaders and focusing on achieving their dreams. I was thankfully part of GLOW when I was 14 years old, which is a very, very tender age. I mean, I'm sure you remember when you were a teenager, you had many dreams, you also had, I'm sure, many obstacles in front of you in high school and studies and schooling. And I managed somehow to get into the organization, and 20 years later, I am still part of it. It was the best thing that happened to me, and why I say that this organization put me on the path to entrepreneurship is because I was surrounded by like-minded girls throughout my journey of post the actual camp. And my best audience and the people who really helped me get to the best idea for a business were actually the campers of GLOW. I became friends with multiple of the participants, and throughout the years they were kind of my shoulder to rely on and to cry on. And I ran through some of my best friends like those numerous ideas about businesses. Just gathering their thoughts and feedback and what it would work, and if they were to buy my product or service, how much I can charge them. So when it comes to thinking of, a business and trying to come up with the best idea, absolutely you should use your network, and you should really focus on listening. I mean, your podcast is literally all about that. I will talk if you listen. And when you listen really well, you can actually reach and figure out new ideas that have never been spoken before. And that's what entrepreneurship is. And even if, even if you don't have the best idea, you can always just think of what is the best way for me to realize my potential, what makes me happy, and who can maybe put me on the right path of getting to where I need to be as an entrepreneur. So GLOW for me was just the, so to say, mode of how I got there. But I do encourage all your listeners to participate in multiple organizations, groups, friends, different societies, and networks so that they can really expand their understanding about the world and really get to hone in on that idea for a business, if that's what they dream of.
Oh, that's beautiful, Tsvetta. It really, really is. And the biggest piece of passion I can take off from that response, what you just said, is how it impacted you now as an adult and the type of impression that this organization put on you. It inspired you, and it helped push you, propel you through your dreams. And what it makes me think about is a group, organization that I was in when I was younger. And we had to come up with a name. And the name we chose were the Young Lions. And it was just a simple mentor group.
Love it.
We didn't do anything great. Yeah, it was very powerful. And we learned how to cook, and we learned how to tie a tie, those simple, essential things that maybe young boys wouldn't get early on. And when I hear GLOW, when I hear about GLOW, I can't help but to think about Young Lions. But the one thing I want to key on specifically is the name, how powerful and impactful Girls Leading Our World is. Do you remember what your thought process was when you first heard the name, and did it instill any feelings in you at all?
I was just speechless. I mean, I must have been 12 when I first heard about the organization. And Tim, I heard about it from Peace Corps. So Peace Corps was actually on a mission in Bulgaria to change people's lives and to assist with youth education specifically. And I stumbled upon Glow thanks to a Peace Corps volunteer. And as soon as they said this, so of course, the Peace Corps volunteers and I communicated in English because at the time I already spoke English well enough to be able to communicate. And when they said the word glow, I actually thought of a glow stick. And it was, to me, incredible. I actually thought it's a camp that shines. That's literally what I thought.
Wow.
When
beautiful.
when they literally explained to me what it means and what it stands for, I just thought that there could have not been a more perfect name for this camp, because what it really does is shine and give hope and give young adolescent women the opportunity to dream and really a platform where they can express themselves and meet other like-minded women. And to this day, 20 plus years later, I still think that the name is so powerful that it's carried almost a lot of the success of the organization just because of the strong and bold mission and statement it has just within its name. So that's also another point to make for our fellow entrepreneurs. When you think of the name of your organization or your business, make sure that it does have a call to action or any sort of messaging that will really resonate with either the product or the type of service that you offer, because people will remember the name and the name will stick. The name will stick and it will bring you success if you pick the right words and the right messaging.
Wow, that's beautiful. And that's fantastic advice. And you and I like to think, are living testimonies of that. To this day, to your point, almost 20 years later, I still remember Young Lions. I still remember how I felt when I heard Young Lions. I felt like a young lion. I felt like the world was there for me to take it. And the impression that girls leading our world, Glow, left on you and so many other young ladies, I'm sure is, you can't count it. You can't define it in some cases either. Now, still being involved in the organization, I'm sure you get a chance to work with a lot of these young women on a regular basis. Do you ever see a little of Tsvetta in any of the young women that you come across?
I do. I really do. And it gives me so much hope. I mean, what I really look for when I work with youngsters, so to say, and by the way, Tim, I'm sure you probably feel the same way. I can't believe that I'm an adult, okay? Like, I feel like I joined Glow just a few months ago, and I'm sort of reliving the camp itself. Sometimes when I actually think that I'm an adult and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm, well above or well over 30, I can't believe it, because in my mind, I just feel like I am a kid. And that's why I really realized the importance of giving back in terms of helping others, whether that's with mentorship, whether that's with internship placements, or even just someone to help you navigate through day to day, whether that's your work or schoolwork, whatever that is just so incredibly valuable. And I do work with a few organizations and a few different girls who, our goal is not only do we want them to be participants in this week-long program, but after they're done with the camp, we do keep close touch with all of them. So at this, I think at this point we have 1,100 alumni, and we're the biggest female leadership academy on the Balkans. And we even got a call out from Michelle Obama a few years ago for the work that Peace Corps has been doing with Glow. It has changed lives, and it has been so tremendously beneficial to multiple societies and countries at this point. So I'm incredibly honored, and it's just such a privilege to be able to work with young women and young boys as well throughout different avenues and different organizations. And I do think that they give me the energy and they give me the ideas, including ideas for my business, and they kind of keep me on my toes. They do help a lot with, I'm sure all the listeners have heard of TikTok and all these crazy social media apps, and sometimes I'm in digital and I feel like I'm behind, but all my mentees, they keep me on my toes and they always help me out with figuring out the next step. So it's almost like I actually get more out of mentoring them and being part of their lives probably than they do from me.
Well, hey, that's what it's all about, right? You know, mentorship is a two-way street. It's something
Right.
that the mentor and the mentee can learn and grow from. And at that point, everyone's glowing.
Yes.
Not just the mentees. So speaking of glowing, Tsvetta, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. So back in the day, you participated in a beauty pageant.
Oh,
and
no, I knew you would say that.
So I think the thing that's interesting about you participating in the beauty pageant, at first glance, it was, oh, this is a cool experience. This is something that you did. But I also read that you didn't initially want to do that. You're not even sure why you chose to do that. You've always been into other things like books and school and learning and continuing your knowledge base. And I got to thinking about those young men and young women that you interact with and how many of them are maybe at a point in their life right now where they're doing something and they feel like, you know what, I'm going to be stuck doing this for the rest of my life. And just like you with that beauty pageant, you said, no, this pageant doesn't define who I am. I may be Miss Bulgaria, but I'm more than Miss Bulgaria. I'm also Tsvetta. What would you say to all of those young men and women right now who may be listening, or hey, even in some cases, some adults who may be in a phase in their life where they feel like, you know what, I'm stuck. I can't get out of the quicksand right now. What would you say to those men and women?
Hey, I would just encourage them to find a different outlet. If something's not working out at the moment, and maybe you're unhappy, maybe just feel stuck, just do something differently. Find a new friend, find a new organization to partner with or to volunteer at. Change your routine. And I know this is challenging to say right now because we're all stuck at home. So you can't really change much in the routine, but the digital world is so powerful. So you could, on any given day, you could connect with someone from China or someone from Bulgaria or participate in a new organization that may give you something new in terms of perspective, hope, belief, or even just new friends. So I always encourage everyone, don't feel like you're stuck into being you. That was also why I participated in that beauty pageant. I actually thought it was the most superficial thing to do because I am a geek. I love books, and I always thought of myself as someone relatively educated and intelligent enough to understand that beauty pageants don't define women and beauty. And for this one time, I just thought to myself, you know what? I have to break this up. I have to do something differently and try a different avenue to see whether my persona and myself, my happiness, creativity maybe they will get affected. Maybe it will actually bring me something. And I was right. I actually met my best friend, my first friend in New York City, because I moved to New York City, like literally months before that beauty pageant. I met there. And here we are. 10 years later, we're going strong, and I'm so thankful that I met her. I cannot imagine my life without her.
Wow. I think that's a testament to your personality and your tenacity. And I think surrounding yourself with like-minded people who have the same standards as you and says, you know, absolutely right. We are more than just our looks as women. I think that's really, really important. And I think it's really important for not only your best friend of 10 years, but even that young man or young woman that you come across or man that you come across that says, hey, I'm not the stereotypical cookie cutter woman that you think, you know, and to trailblaze a new path and to define a new path, I think is really important. I think we need to redefine what people feel like certain people are capable of. And I couldn't have said it better myself. I'm really, really happy. Now, I do want to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. And then I know I took a lot of your time. I'm going to let you go. I want to talk about food. And I don't know about you, Tsvetta. I love to eat.
Oh, yes. Now we're talking.
I love to eat. Now, my thing, I'm from Philly, born and raised, and everything about me is Philly. from the sports teams I root for to the way I talk around my friends. And when most people hear about Philly, outside from the way we act at sports events, and I'm sure you being in New York, you can relate to a degree. People think about, we say water ice, we add an R in the word water. We talk about Philly soft pretzels, we talk about hoagies, and we talk about cheesesteaks. Now, when I leave Philly and I go to other places and I try to get something that they have from Philly, I learn my lesson. It is not the same. In Philly, we don't say Philly cheesesteaks. We just say cheesesteaks. So if I'm going somewhere and it says Philly cheesesteak on the menu, I know I'm not getting it. Being from, right outside of Bulgaria, be a part of Bulgaria, and eating food back home, was there anything like that coming to one of the world's most diverse places and experiencing quote-unquote authentic Bulgarian cuisine? Was it the same? Did they do a pretty good job?
Well, it's a tough one because there are actually no Bulgarian restaurants. So I live in Manhattan, and the city has the best restaurants, hands down, probably in the whole world. So you can get Indian on one corner, Japanese, American, just best food you can ever get. Probably for like really cheap too. Because of course everyone's competing, best food one against the other. There are no Bulgarian restaurants though. And there are no really Balkan restaurants near where I live. So I can't really speak much about it. But the funny thing is my boyfriend actually cooks at home, and he's a way better cook than I am. And he makes some Bulgarian recipes probably better than I would bake them. So I have the privilege of actually having that at home. I know. Having that at home. But I know exactly what you mean. Because sometimes, it's the same thing. Like, I've been to Italy many times, and I love Italian food. And then you could go to a restaurant that's anywhere in Brooklyn, and you would expect that they would have the best Italian food, and you'd be so disappointed because it's like, well, this has nothing to do with what I order in Italy. It just has the same name. But yeah, no, I totally relate with you. And I'm such a big foodie. I can talk about food all day long. I love testing food and trying out food. I love when people make food and I get to test it. When it comes to cooking it, I struggle a little bit more. But I'm so happy that, thankfully American restaurants and New York City restaurants just offer some of the best quality, authentic food and ingredients that you really wouldn't miss a specific country that much because you just have it downstairs at the corner.
Wow, that's high praise. That's high praise, man. Manhattan, do you hear that? Very high praise. Oh yeah.
Seriously. So wait, so you always go for, I guess I was gonna say Philly steak, but you always go for like the steak? Or is there something that, I guess when you travel, say if you're like away from Philly and you miss it so much, is there like a go-to other item from the menu you would pick that, you miss terribly, or is like steak your thing?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked that because I think anyone from Philly can relate to what I'm about to say, but this isn't really spoken about much. Water ice. So to break down what water ice is for people who are listening, if you're outside of maybe South Jersey, or Philadelphia, you may not know what water ice is. So first things first, hey, if you're not from Philly, you're probably thinking, is he talking a different language? So we put R's in the word water, W-A-T-E-R. We add an extra R before the T. So we say water ice. And it's basically a combination of a Slurpee and Italian ice. If you've ever eaten Italian ice as a kid, it's this hard block of ice, but it's very a slushy style. It's very soft. It's very easy to eat, and it tastes amazing. And a lot of the places that you can get water ice from is they use authentic ingredients. So it's actual fruit that they're throwing in there. It's not just all syrup. So if you're thinking, oh, is it like a snow cone? No, it's not like shaved ice with flavored syrup. It's not like that. So whenever I'm away from Philly, or the Philadelphia area, I can never get water ice because it's not a thing. And I remember one time going to Harlem. And one thing I will say about Harlem is it reminds me a lot of West Philly. And
Okay.
I always say, if you fall asleep on a car ride to Harlem and you wake up and someone told you, hey, you're in West Philadelphia, they would believe you. Because it's very, very similar. So I'm in Harlem, I'm walking around Harlem, and very excited. I'm at a book fair. Very exciting. So I'm
All
at
right.
Harlem at a book fair, and I said, hey, I want a snack. I want some more ice. And my friend goes, oh, yeah, they sell Italian ice at the bodega over here. I'm like, oh, sweet. And I'm not thinking anything of it. Italian ice, whatever.
Sure.
And I go and I get it, and it's this block of ice that's like, and they don't even give you a spoon. You get like this wooden like paddle thing that you're supposed to chip away at the ice. Oh, Tsvetta, I was so upset. I was so upset. So believe it or not, it's not Philly cheesesteaks. Although we do love those, it's water ice. You can't get good water ice outside of the Philadelphia area.
All right, noted. As you were speaking, as soon as you said water ice, I thought, wait, what? I was literally just Googling it, and I have never heard of it before. But that's good to know, because when the pandemic is over, and next time I'm in Philly, I will go and get water ice, as long as I know where to find it from. I guess a bodega would have water ice, or is it like an ice cream truck type of? Where do you pick it up?
So, I don't know if you all have Mr. Softy in Manhattan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have Mr. Softy. Stay away from Mr. Softy. So with Mr. Softy, you can get soft serve, you can get custard, and you can get the popsicle sticks and the Sonic the Hedgehog or Ninja Turtle popsicles and everything. But they don't have the water ice. In order to get water ice, you have to find a different type of, it's still called an ice cream truck, but it's not Mr. Softy. He drives around, he has a different tune. But yeah, you're actually absolutely right. Here in Philly, we just say corner store, but yes, it would be a bodega. You would go to the bodega and get they have water ice. They have these big tubs of water ice, and they take the ice cream scooper and they scoop. Sometimes you can go to a local ice cream parlor. Now, the face of water ice is Rita's water ice, RITA''S water ice. And that's the quote unquote front runner, because it's the official store. But some of the best places that have water ice are the places that no one knows about, because they're the little secret hideout places. So whenever you're in Philly or maybe South Jersey, just ask your friend that you're with, or ask someone for maybe a good old fashioned ice cream parlor. And you can go and get some really good water ice.
Well, guess what? I'm in luck, because Rita's is apparently in downtown Manhattan, and they have a store there. So guess where I'll be going.
There you go.
After this is over. After the pandemic is over, that'll be the first place. I love dessert. I mean, I'm all about dessert. Any type of, if it has sugar in it, basically sign me up. So I'm adding that place on the list. Seriously, I'm gonna send you a picture. As soon as this is open and I go get it, I promise I'll send you a picture. Make a note of that.
Please do. I would love to. And then I'll take a picture at Rita's and I'll put them together and post it on Instagram. It'll be great. It'll be a very cool picture.
Ice cream picture buddies.
It's Tsvetta, this has been amazing. I look forward to maybe even having you on the show in the future. To have someone on the show and genuinely believe in what they're doing and see the good that they're doing, and to just share a laugh and, break up on the monotony and just let loose a little bit, let your hair down a little bit. It's so refreshing.
Yeah.
So while we have you and while we have the audience, what do you have upcoming that maybe you want to share?
Well, interesting upcoming, I guess, events and things from my part are actually Camp Glow is coming up in just a few short weeks. And while the world has shut down because of the pandemic, we are still planning on holding the camp itself, even though maybe in a different format. And we are also looking forward to transitioning to fully digitalized. so to say, classes. So over the next few months, we do plan on developing kind of a curriculum, which will be available to other women globally. So if you're obviously not in Bulgaria and you can't participate. And the cool thing is everything is in English. So that is something pretty exciting. And just for everyone out there, kind of the last thing I just wanted to leave you with is just remember, just go for it. That's the one line you need to remember. Just go for it and dream big and it will happen. Just put in the effort, it will happen.
I love it. I love it. So that's a go for Camp Glow. So everyone out there listening, definitely look that up. And can they find information on Camp Glow on the Peace Corps website?
Yes, they can. And actually, Peace Corps just featured an interview with us, so they can see us right away. They'll probably see my picture on it as soon as they open Peace Corps site. So we're on there.
Perfect. Great. So, Tsvetta, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Tim, pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for the time, and have a lovely, lovely rest of the day.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Wasn't that beautiful? Wasn't that just a beautiful interview? It was so great. I'm extremely humbled to have had the opportunity to have Tsvetta on the show, and so grateful for her media team reaching out to me and even introducing Tsvetta to the podcast. So her media team listened to the show and passed that along to Tsvetta. So I'm incredibly humbled and grateful for that. I appreciate that so much. I'm so excited, and Tsvetta, I'm motivated now to go out and do better. So it was just an awesome opportunity to have you on, and hopefully I can have you on again. Now, I encourage everybody to go to peacecorps.gov and check out a little bit more about what Peace Corps is, what it stands for, what it represents. And hey, if that's not your thing, that's okay. Everybody can contribute in their own different ways. But I think having someone like Tsvetta on that represents the brighter side of humanity is really important to encourage people like you, people like me, and more importantly, the young men and women out there to just do better, to step it up. Go after your dreams. You're not limited to the definition that society has put on you and people like you. You can go and achieve so much more. So I'm so excited to get this out and about on the interwebs. That said, everybody, I know I kept you for long, and I appreciate you sticking around. And I'm gonna go get this edited so I can get this out so you all can listen to it. So as always, gang, thanks for sticking around, and I'll keep talking if you'll listen. Take care.